Hey everybody, and welcome back to Experience Points, a less formal, more laid-back sort of video where I talk about games that I've played a little bit of but have not yet finished. And today I'm very excited to be talking about Chained Echoes, a game that I have received so many requests from you to talk about that I reached out to the team behind it, and I was provided a review copy. It's been getting a lot of comparisons to Chrono Trigger. Is that true though? I don't know. I don't think I want to put it up on that pedestal and say that it is like the next Chrono Trigger, because I mean it has some similarities and we will talk about them. Many allusions to Chrono Trigger, in fact, a lot of repeated names from the games, a lot of names of items from the games making a recurrence, some mini games that feel very similar. It pays homage to Chrono Trigger, but I don't think that it is really a successor. I don't think this is the next Chrono Trigger, you know? But that doesn't mean that it's not good, because it is actually very good. Chained Echoes, guys, is a game that takes place in sort of a somewhat modern feeling sort of era in a fantasy world that also contains mechs. So it feels a little bit diesel punk, a little, I don't want to say steampunk, because I don't think there was a whole lot of like steam sort of stuff going on, but it's this world where magic and technology coexist. And it starts off with this really interesting guy, you know, again, starts off with a direct homage to Chrono Trigger. And I wonder if that might be one of the reasons people are so quick to compare it to Chrono Trigger, with the mom opening the blinds or their curtains and saying how wonderful it is outside today and wake up, you know, it's got that direct homage, which is phenomenal, right? You know, it goes straight for the feels right off the bat. They did a really good job of setting the expectation and then completely undermining those expectations shortly thereafter. It is probably one of the best ways to start off the game for a game like this, I think. Throws you into the action pretty quickly. You are a soldier on an airship and you're going into battle very soon after the game begins, and things just go sideways right away. And then when you think they've gone sideways, they go even crazier, and then fast forward about a year, and then you're playing as a couple of other people. And this game does this really interesting way of introducing you to a whole bunch of different people who are going through different aspects of the world, and then eventually they kind of find each other through some mere happenstance. Some crazy serendipity brings them all together, and they start going on an adventure together. It reminds me a whole lot of like the beginning of a D&D campaign. You can all start by, oh, we're all in this tavern together, but how did you get to the tavern? Well, you have a little lead in, and this is kind of one of those things that this game actually addresses. It not just, you know, people finding each other gradually and adding one person to the party. It's like groups of people who are off doing their own thing with their own invested time and efforts going into something, and those groups find each other. And it offers a lot of characterization that way, and I really appreciate that. You know, everybody kind of goes into the story, into this group, having their own best friend that they can already talk to each other, and that's really nice. The combat of the game is really very interesting, and it all kind of has to do with this gauge. Every combat within the game has this sort of balance to it, of trying to go hard to get into the rhythm, but then not going so hard that you burn out. And that is sort of reflected in this gauge. It's a really very smart way to do things with this gauge, where you're trying to kind of keep the battle meter within certain parameters, and different moves can either increase where the gauge is or decrease where the gauge is. And that is a really smart thing to do. It feels like an additional way to have a tactical side of this combat, some sort of strategy to this combat. If you're within optimal parameters, moves cost less to do and you take less damage and things like that. Whereas if you go too hard, then that kind of leaves you open to vulnerability. I really like the concept of it. It feels a little like it could be, in my opinion, maybe multiplied somewhat to really make it especially dire for my playstyle. Maybe eventually there will be like a different sort of difficulty level where being within those parameters makes more of a difference, but it feels pretty subtle, at least in the very beginning. I'm only about maybe 5 hours in, so I don't know if it really opens up widely after that, if it really continues to expand, but it feels like this is the sort of game that continues to introduce new concepts and mechanics as you continue to play your way through. You know, I have recently acquired gems that allow you to basically give job classes or job class sort of upgrades to individuals within your team, and you can upgrade your equipment, and you can do all sorts of really neat things that didn't exist in Chrono Trigger. So I'm going to kind of bring it back to that. Chrono Trigger has a very interesting set of visual aesthetics, right? It's got the taller sprites, which this game has. It's got no random encounters, which is similar to this game. Combat takes place on the same field, very similar to this game. But mechanically, it's vastly different. Tonally, it has a very much more serious tone shift, I think, than Chrono Trigger. The art is much more serious style than Chrono Trigger. Trigger has like that Akira Toriyama shonen style anime that kind of lends itself to being, you know, a fun romp. And this, though, has a much more serious tone to it. I wouldn't be surprised to see this have more in common with Xenogears down the line, with its, you know, mechs and such, and its more, it feels like a more adult themed, a more serious themed, more to do with like the mental struggles of some of them. I don't know yet, but I hope to see it kind of explore some of that a bit more down the line. You know, a lot more political intrigue than what was in Chrono Trigger. There are plenty of references to Chrono Trigger. This is not a Chrono Trigger title. It doesn't feel like a Chrono Trigger title. It has lots of homages to it, but this is distinctly its own thing. That is what I want to set expectations for. The art is absolutely beautiful. It is some of the best pixel art that I've seen in recent years. Seeing it come from an indie RPG developer like this is so freaking awesome and satisfying. If we're going to continue comparing it to Chrono Trigger, I feel like Trigger might have had more animations for expressing different emotions and things, and I don't think they were trying to make the next Chrono Trigger. They were making something very unique and on its own, and that's something that I think if you're into, if you are looking for a more serious version of Chrono Trigger but weren't tied to like the dual and triple techs, then you'll definitely want to check this out. I won't say that there's a lack of any sort of strategy to it, and in fact I would say that some of the characters are actually super interesting. So you can swap out characters from the front and back rows, kind of like Breath of Fire, which is something that I freaking love, and you can do that mid-battle without really any cost associated with switching them in and out. So it's kind of like a tag team sort of setup. So in that regard, I think it's a lot like Octopath Traveler, and each of the characters feels pretty distinct so far. The abilities that they have kind of compound with one another. So for instance, there's this girl in the party, I can't remember what her name is at the moment, but she's got this very much like thief sort of assassin style to her, where she can use a katana, and if you use certain moves, it unlocks her ability, a special ability that does incredible amounts of damage at random intervals. Like if you critical hit with it or something like that, it's got this thing that'll trigger this other skill that you can then use and do crazy amounts of damage, which is really cool. One of the other characters is kind of a ranger sort of person, but he also has the ability to cast poison on enemies, and he can use another ability called Pandemic, which then spreads that poison to other enemies that you're fighting, making it essentially an AoE, so you can deal massive amounts of damage through that way. And I really appreciate how that is something that has continued to manifest throughout each of these characters. Like they not just have like certain moves that they use, but they also compound with those moves. And you can really, really get this awesome rhythm going of like afflicting status effects and then building those up and making them into something bigger, casting poison and inflicting bleed on an enemy, and so they take like 60 damage at the beginning of every round, you know, from both effects. I love that aspect of it, and I can feel like this is going to have a really awesome snowball effect down the road, and I can't wait to really dive in further and take a better look at this game in the future. But unfortunately, this is where I'm going to have to put my playthrough on pause for the time being, because I'm still making my way through other games. Hopefully, when I'm done with one of those, though, I can come back around to Chained Echoes and actually give it, I think, a full playthrough. This is one of those games that I think I'm really going to make an effort to make my way through in its entirety at some point. But until then, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great day, everyone.